All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. It is 2:33 p.m. on this June 11th, 2015. How did we get to June already? I don't know. I know. I'm glad you're having fun. I just got back from Hawaii at 9:15. I was going to say, I was relaxed on Monday morning. This is Thursday afternoon. I'm not relaxed anymore. All right. First item for us is roll call. I'm going to start on the other side this time. Somebody I can pronounce the name and I won't pick. And you won't be here much. Mr. Wilbur.
Here.
Ms. West. Here. Mr. Hanson.
Here.
Mr. Weaver.
Here.
Mr. Lindemood.
Present.
Mr. Miyashiro.
Present.
Mr. Morgan. Ms. Walsh. Here. And Mr. Laus. And I am here, we do have a quorum. Craig, would you mind making a public involvement announcement?
You bet. All of AMATS meetings are public meetings, and the public is invited to comment. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or a consultant. The committee will then be given a chance to comment, and then at that point, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you. So yes, we've become trees today.
What else were they going to do?
I know. The first piece of paper in front of us is the agenda.
So,
Do I have a second?
second.
Moved by Mr. Wilbur, second by Mr. Hanson. Are there any opposed to approving the agenda? Hearing no opposition, the agenda is approved. Alright, now for us are a couple of the meeting minutes. The first one is April 9th, 2015.
Move to approve.
I'm going to abstain since I'm
If there was some, I think Craig, we talked about it, and maybe it's later on as informational item, it's kind of a follow-up to some of the questions that came up as part of the household travel survey and how it relates to the new model update. So if we can have that addressed later, that's nice stuff. That works.
Sure.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Lincoln, a second to approve minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Witt. Are there any opposed to approving the minutes for the April 9th meeting? I know we have 2 abstentions. Hearing no opposition, those minutes are approved. Next before us is May 14th minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Mr. Lincoln, second by Mr. Wilbur. Are there any opposed to approving the minutes?
Same thing, I'm going to abstain.
Here I am.
Well done. That was quicker.
Are there any opposed?
Bye.
No. All right, hearing no opposition, those are all approved. I think we have enough of this. Yes, okay. Even with the extensions, we still have one of those that we're good. All right, so May 15th. So, next item is item 5A, the Citizens Advisory Committee bylaws and recruitment memo.
Okay, so at the last policy committee meeting, they voted to approve the change from the Planning and Zoning Commission serving as a Citizen Advisory Committee to the creation of a standalone Citizen Advisory Committee, including the addition of the sunset clause till June. Can't remember exactly the year, but anyway. So they approved that and asked that we take up at our next meeting, in case you take up at the next meeting, the creation of the committee, approval or recommendation for public review of these bylaws. So we have the bylaws and the recruitment policy before you. When I originally sent out the recruitment policy, it was just focused on the Citizen Advisory Committee. Cindy had sent back some comments suggesting that it be applied to all the different committees, but I didn't hear unanimous recommendation and approval of that idea, so I left it at this. Obviously, we can morph it to whatever we want. But this includes the recruitment policy includes the idea that we would post some, the open call for 30 days. If we didn't get enough applications, we would have an additional 14 days to keep doing that until we get enough applications. And we're looking for the 6 slots for the assembly seats, and then we'll come up with the ones for the Chamber of Commerce's, the one for J. Bear, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Federation Community Council. So we've had a lot of discussion on this. We've had a work session on this. Happy to entertain other ideas or changes that might need to occur, but we're looking today, staff is looking today for your recommendation for a public review process for both of these items through the policy committee.
I make a motion to recommend moving forward.
What was that?
I will move to do whatever Craig just said.
Public release, recommended the policy committee for third reading.
Oh, yeah, before we make any motion on it, we'll open it to public comment. If there are any questions or comments.
I get ahead of myself.
Yes.
Does that include the, sorry, Madam Chair, Brian Hill here, does that include the recruitment and the bylaws? Is that all going out to the public?
That was my recommendation.
Okay. That was the recommendation we used for something, but so we make our own. Yeah, no, so, okay. If there aren't any questions or comments from the committee, I'm gonna open it for public comment at this time. Are there any questions or comments on the bylaws and the recruitment?
There's one,
Name, direct.
Gary Katzian. I didn't see anything in either of these documents talking about the sunset clause. So it probably wouldn't hurt to let the people know that it's potentially a 2-year process or whatever.
You could add a section 6 in the bylaws. Recommend that sunset clause.
Part of the reason the policy committee accepted the recommendation. Did they say in their last meeting, the policy committee say the date that they wanted to put that policy so that can be added in?
It's in the policy committee minutes. I think it was in Lance's original motion, which might be in the main minutes, actually.
I think it's July 1st, 2017.
What was that?
July 1st, 2017.
Yeah, July 1st, 2017.
Okay.
And the policy, Chair, in terms of adding that sunset clause, what would it include besides the date, and who determines whether or not they, I can call Lance, we talked about an evaluation of its success or the,
Sunset clauses in all boards and commissions for the Alaska legislature, basically boilerplate language, that basically say, this board ceases to be in existence on such and such a date unless the
Unless, okay, that's
legislature
good, okay.
decides to continue its, existence for another 10 years or whatever,
first
so.
to a pumpkin unless otherwise
Yes.
established. Okay.
So it would be something like that. In other words, it goes away if no action is taken.
Pumpkin.
Actually, we're taking over. We're happy, actually, not taking
Kind of like a what?
Oh.
We're off to a right start.
I think we're outnumbered.
We are.
I said, and my husband. All right, sorry, I digress, Madam Chair.
I'm tickled, Joe, I'm sorry.
All right. there any other questions or comments from the public at this time? All right, hearing none, the matter lies with us. Mr. Lau,
Move to approve.
recommendation of,
Yeah. As amended at item 6, Sunset Cross.
Second.
is that you, Mr. Lindner?
Yeah, sure.
Just making sure. Are there any opposed to releasing these two items to, well, recommending releasing these items to the policy committee for 30 days?
Recommend policy.
Yes.
I'll write up the language and send it around and attach it to the draft for the sunset clause. It's pretty standard.
Okay. All right. Hearing no other opposed, we are. All right, next item is item 5E, the interim MPP air quality conformity. This is
So our standard practice is when we're adopting a tip or releasing a tip, or same thing with an MPP, is look at the air quality conformity first, because if it doesn't pass air quality conformity, then there's no reason to approve it. So the first thing we have before us is the draft air quality conformity determination, and none of us here to illuminate the subject for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This, as Craig explained, for the record, my name is Vivian Underwood, I'm Senior Transportation Officer at AMATS. This is the companion document to the TSC draft Interim 2035 MTP. And I think that you have a memo for this and the air quality conformity determination report. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The highlights are that because we are limited maintenance areas, we have to work on a seal in our Angry Hall and for Panton and Eagle River, we now no longer have modeling requirements, but we can rely on the rear election only. And so that's what this report does, and it's been updated. It was based on the one from the last tip, but they added 2014 data. And that's been basically a change from the one that you already saw from the tip. So the bottom line is that it has been determined that the MTP will not undermine the abilities of UNI to maintain compliance with the NICU's order ceiling. It's pretty simple, sweet, and straightforward. And we didn't receive any comments after the ones we were submitted to all for comment last time. So if you like, you can wait until, it depends on what your pleasure is, if you want to approve it now or with the next item.
I may take it as an individual item.
Or, I mean, recommend to the policy committee for release to the public for review.
Are there any questions for the
So Vivian, when you did this, you normal consultation process working with DEC and all the others, so they were part of that.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I meant to thank Teresa Brewer for pulling together the air quality conformity consultation.
Okay.
Please forgive me. Yes,
All right.
all the appropriate channels with your FTA, official, would you like to say something?
I just need to know
about
if it's
that?
done.
Yeah,
It's
EPA,
done.
all the normal participants that we have. Steve, you're
I have it on my list of things to do.
Any other questions or comments from the committee before we open it for public? All right, so any questions or comments from the public here on the draft air quality performance determination in front of us? All right, hearing none, the matter now lies with the committee. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I recommend to the policy committee the release of the draft air quality conformity determination for the interim 2035 transportation plan, subject to them also releasing the interim MTP as well. Second.
Seconded by Mr. Fox. Are there any opposed? None, we are approved. Thank you, and so the next item in front of us is the interim NTP.
Surprise.
Yeah.
So you have a memo for this, and you also have a copy of an email from Mr. Wilbur, that these were his comments that came in after the document was posted. We just wanted to There are no surprises there, it's just basically edits, text edits that Mr. Wilson requested. So we will put those in and draft those forward to the policy committee. And then also you have a copy of revised table 6-3, I should say corrected. The table in the draft simply, something over the data, and Aaron caught that. And so these were the numbers that were intended to in the draft. But the nice thing about this draft is I would like to call to your attention the Federal Highway Administration and STA and our certification review process to simplify some of these tables. And this was Wilbur and Aaron Youngman did that. They created this cool little table in the very beginning that talks about physical constraint. And Mr. Wilbur helped us because we were struggling with how to do that. And while I was out of the room, they came up with methodology, so I'm not sure what they said. But so on page 6-2, we have this nice, really concise table that takes you from short term to long term, and all the numbers add up, which is what I like. And they agree with the table in the back, which shows physical constraints for every single year. It's appendix D. So that's what the FHWA folks wanted us to do, was to just put in the capsule. And what it does show is that by the end of the long-term planning period, in 2035, there shows an estimated surplus. But that's not in the short term, and it doesn't mean that we're adding a new project. And also because the long-term projections are always subject to more volatility. That should be near term. So this is, we did offer the work session on the 27th, May 27th, and several people stopped by. We appreciate that. And we received really good comments, edits from Memo, Ms. Walsh, and from several others. And so we appreciate that. And Mr. Wilbur helped us with the information. So I feel like this is a really good sound document, and there might still be some typos in there, but we've had a lot of eyes on this. So I think it's pretty good.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Anybody? Well done. Yeah, I know I provided my comments before, and I was nitpicky about a lot of things, the little things, but I thought overall it looked great. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's definitely a team effort. It's not just the three of us, but all staff.
Are there any questions or comments from the public at this time? Hearing none.
Madam Chair, I recommend to the policy committee the release for public review, the interim 2035 Metropolitan Transportation Plan as drafted.
Second.
Second by Mr. Love. Are there any opposed to the motion?
Let's get that part started.
Chair, could I ask that we clarify that the edits in the memo would be such as staff meeting?
Okay, the appended, the email and then as presented? Okay. Are there any opposed to the addition of those edits? No. All right, clarification, sure. Thank you. All right. And we recommend policy committee with this. Thank you.
This is Jacob, I just called in.
Oh, thank you, Les. That was perfect timing because our item is just up.
Yeah, item 5E. Yeah, so we're now on to item 5E, Max, the ITS architecture approval.
This also you give me this paper. Yeah. Assistant Board.
Thank you. Les Jacobson, our consultant for this project, is online, and he has kindly made himself available for any questions. So for this item, you have a memo and a memo addendum that was just drafted today, stated today. You have the Anchorage Regional ITS Architecture Update Final, the Use and Maintenance Guide Draft, Implementation Plan, and the Strategic Integration Manual. I know this is a lot of paper, but we only do this once every 2 years, so it's not catch up. So the ITS architecture is a secondary plan for AMATS. It's required by the final rule for ITS that was passed in 2001. Public involvement for this plan focused on key agency stakeholders as opposed to broad public involvement among the public, general public. We had a project team with Rick Feller with DOT, Val Rader, Aaron Norman, Lisa Idelsasi, who's the ITS coordinator for the state, John Kratz, and John Pickett. It meets all the goals that we wanted for this project. It updates the architecture to reflect the latest NTP recommendations and the national ITS architecture changes. It streamlines the 2004 architecture into one nice, elegant, clean document. The current architecture is fills a notebook, and this is just one document now. So it converts the architecture using Turbo Architecture database software and includes the DOT NPF iOS architecture in one database. And we'll be putting the architecture on the web in hopes that people will actually be enticed to use it, and it'll be fun for people to actually force around and learn from it. And it demonstrates integration with the overall planning process used by planners for the NTP and the congestion management process for putting projects under the tip, and for designers, for people who have to complete the systems engineering checklist that's required by DOT and PI for ITS projects. So just real quickly, I wanted to give you 2 benefits, 2 real-world examples of when the ITS architecture has been used. One is for transit. When they were thinking of putting in, they wanted to put in closed-circuit television in the downtown transit center. And this was an ITS project. And they called me over there to talk with them about working through the ITS systems engineering checklist. And one thing that came up was, in looking at the different functionalities that could be included in this kind of project, was, do you want these images to be shared with the police department, APD? And that may seem like a simple thing to think about, but they had actually not thought about it at that point. And they decided to put that in, images and other kinds of communications. So if you add that kind of functionality at the back end of the project, when it's all completed, it can add a lot of cost. But because they decided to do it up front, they were able to work with ABD and at least if they're not, it doesn't require transit to pay for the connections for ABD to get those images. It just requires them to work with them. So another example is parking. Well, we've been working with the Easy Park folks for several years now. They would like to do some kind of real-time parking information. They basically travel the knowledge. They're not ready to do it yet, but they will be. And so when we reached out to them, they were not aware that we have this cool new app that Jamie actually is working at, Ride-Amigos, that is a multi-mobile travel app. And they were not aware of the need that Alaska 511 would like to post that information on there. So through this whole process, they're now aware that they probably should come to us. And even whether or not they use federal funds, it's a good idea to use the architecture. There's just 2 little examples. Then the ITS implementation plan recommends various strategies by time phase. The near term is 0 to 3 years, medium term 3 to 5 years. No projects fall into the long-term horizon 5 to 10 years, but that depends on how you deal with them. There are no technological implementation reasons to wait to implement any of the projects identified. It helps with the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, through this whole process, we discovered that the For the tip, we really need a mid-level plan that's going to give us more detail. The projects that are in the implementation plan are still at the level of the NTP, and we're at a general level. What we need is something on the order of the bicycle plan or the pedestrian plan that has specific projects with planning on the process. So one of the recommendations of the implementation plan is for, it will probably be in our next tip, to develop that plan, or in our work program. To do that plan. Strategic revision plan. And we have, this project has been closely integrated with the congestion management process update. In fact, just this week, you'll be seeing tech memo number 6 after this item, and that is congestion management strategies. We asked Cambridge Systematics to prepare a mapping document that maps the strategies in the tech memo number 6 to the Untitled Chapter implementation plan. And there's only 1 or 2 strategies that are mapping tech memo number 6, and those have to do with highway rail integration plans. So we'll ask them to include that in there. So there's one thing that we'd like to add to all of this paper, and that is in the implementation plan. This is last minute, but I realize that there is a recommendation in the bicycle plan that has to do with ITS that I wanted to capture more in a more direct way. And that has to do with the addendum memo before you. There is a recommendation in the adopted bicycle plan that says to consider visual or motion detection as options for detecting bicycles at signalized intersections where a high level of bicycle use exists or anticipated. We'd like to add that to the implementation plan for the ITS and add that this strategy can include camera, radar, or other detection. The strategy can be used to detect bicycles as input to the traffic signal controller, as well as providing warnings to drivers of motorized vehicles of the presence of bicyclists through means of dynamic message signs or flashing warning signs. I'd like to reiterate that even though we put it in the ITS implementation plan, it doesn't mean we have to do it. We don't have to do anything in the implementation plan. These are projects that are suggested or recommended based on interviews and based on a survey of all of the adopted plans. So because this is in an adopted plan, we want to do this and have to do it. That's
Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Rubin.
are you finished with it? Have we had a demonstration of this software and see its functionality?
Les Jacobson did get into the architecture somewhat at one of his presentations. He did, and we had a workshop with stakeholders where on use and maintenance of it. Yes, we had.
Here, just curious, so it said it's available for the public to use, and I sent through the public portal that they can.
Is it available now, or is it going to be made available?
It will be. And the use and maintenance guide. Well, Les?
Yeah?
Would you like to address the use and maintenance guide pertaining to the software? The turbo software that we'd like to put on the web?
Okay, so there's two things. There's the software itself, and then there's the database file. So what you would be putting on your web would be the database file. And anyone who wanted to use that directly would need to go to the National Architecture website and download a free version of the Turbo software.
Well, it would probably be a good idea for us to have a fact sheet on all of that. for people who want to do that. Or just put it on the web. So,
Well, I mean, if we're gonna have the capability of doing that for the public to use it, I'd like to see how it's going to be integrated and how the public's really aware of what we have out there for them to use. Actually, I'd like to see, and I guess over time, I'll see how the software works.
it's likely that nobody on this committee will ever have the need to use it, but if anybody who's interested in using it, I'm very encouraged. I mean, I would encourage you to get in there and look at it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Vivian on the book?
Are there any additional thoughts from the gentleman that you got online? Or anything else you add? Or we pretty much,
Well, Les helped me today craft the language in the addendum memo for the bicycle detection. And he agreed with that it was a good thing to do. I wondered, Les, if you'd like to say any more about that.
About the bicycle detection side, I'm having a hard time catching every word, so
I'm
I
sorry.
apologize.
Yeah, about the bicycle detection project that we're going for, the strategy that we're adding to the implementation plan that we talked about today.
Right, so essentially, within the architecture that currently is, there is traffic detection, which can be any type of traffic. It could be truck detection, all vehicle detection, bike detection, whatever. So the automatic detection is incorporated in the architecture. Also, the kind of self-actuation, like push button in the architecture. Although that level of detail doesn't need to be in the architecture, those two concepts are there. And so essentially, in the implementation plan, what Vivian has been talking about is just adding a strategy that would say, included in this is the ability to detect bicycles and either have that be an input into the signal timing of the controller, or to activate a warning message.
And it's not technology dependent. Except we know that DOT has used cameras, and they haven't worked particularly very well with interface. But it could be radar or other technology as appears in the future that we don't know about right now. It's just, if we decide to do that, it's there. And if you turn to, in your book, turn to page 71, there's a diagram there for arterial management flows and flow diagrams. So what Les is talking about is on the right-hand side, there's a bubble for traffic detection. And he informed me today that applies to all users. That applies not just to vehicles, motorized vehicles, but also non-motorized vehicles and bicycles and wheelchairs and all users. So it's all traffic that's on the streets. And there is a call out for a pedestrian who places a call by pushing a button, but as Les explained, that doesn't really have to be there. The whole effort with this architecture is to try to make it at a higher level. The national ITS architecture is great, but their service areas sometimes get bogged down in detail. Like they keep drilling down into more and more detail. And I like their diagrams, but the architecture itself becomes burdened. And until you really have an opportunity to use it, until you have to use it or you want to use it, it seems like it's a bit of a mystery, but it's really not. I know Sharon came to one of our workshops. Two, I think you came to 2 of the workshops. And I think one of the benefits of this was the coordination between stakeholders.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if I can elaborate, one of the best connections that I made at that was the government does the weights and measures monitoring for the weight in motion. And we've been, one of those is located at the entrance to the port. And we've been for a long time wanting to get a better idea. We know the counts that went through, but what size it was, with that download that you gave me, we were able to analyze that. That was pretty cool to know that that kind of thing was available. The other thing we talked about a little bit, it's actually maybe more security related, but we have a couple of cameras on that end of the port that are surveilling the entrances and all that, and that it's good for like APD and those guys to have an idea that we have that and that they can call on us if they need to verify something or something like that. And also the other thing, we can see when the trains are stopping. All the traffic. So that's nice to know. Anyway, yeah, it's the getting from this document to practical application is kind of, how would I use that? Well, that's how we, the way emotion thing's a good example of how we would use it. We do use it, are using it. And then,
Just for clarification, is the addition of this addendum, is it, what prompted it? Did somebody, because it's the first time we've seen this, now we're being asked to adopt it with it. I guess is there, just to be clear, and is the text very, very clear that it's just that if indeed the state of the municipality decides to implement this, to tie it into the bigger picture, is that what is intended here, or? I just want to make sure that it's not construed as being something that is a requirement.
No, and I think we've been,
not sure, I can ask what you mean by the first time we've seen it, because.
No, the addendum part
Oh,
is,
okay.
yes. Oh, no, we've seen this.
Okay.
And actually, they've done a very good job keeping AMATS informed.
You mean the addendum?
Yes. Oh, excuse me, yes, just the addendum.
and to my knowledge, I mean, we've talked about this a long time ago when John Holly was here. No plan has the same weight as the tip. Unless a project gets into the tip, it's not going to be funded by anyone. And so it might be recommended, or it might be nominated for tip funding, but it won't, unless it's approved to go into the tip, it won't be funded. So that's why we were very careful to say, it's recommended phasing of projects, and that has more to do with dependencies. Which project should be done first? It's not at the same level of like the tip that talks about short-term and long-term projects. So I just wanted to put your ideas about that. We don't have to do any of these projects.
Well, there's a number of items, I know when we were discussing this, there's a number of items and capabilities, that either emergency services, transit, there's a lot of things that can be done that are not being done yet, but are at least addressed and covered in the architecture, so that if we ever want to consider them, it kind of gives you that guideline basis of how they're connected to the things you should consider. So I mean, there's a lot of things in here that we're not doing today, but we can, could, if we want to consider them. And I don't think there's anything in this language that, I'm reading through it, I don't feel like there's anything in here that ties my hands, says that I either have to do this or anything, and it gives the options and kind of leaves it open, just considering the detection is so high level. So, I don't think that's sure.
Jamie Acton, Associate Planner. In the past, I've gone off after several discretionary grants, and it has always been very, very helpful if a project that we may be able to fund with outside assistance is listed in some sort of planning document. So even if we're not able to use tip dollars for it, if FHWA or FTA does put out a call for projects, and we have at least mentioned at some point a desire to either study or plan for or to construct those types of projects. It's very helpful to have something that we do tie on, and kind of gives us a leg up on the competition. So that's, from a funding perspective, I think if you would consider that would be.
Is there any other questions or comments from the committee?
So, I have no objections to the strategy, I just have some comments about the timing. I mean, when I look at what's in our near term and what's in our medium term, the ability, whether we can do it or not, Vivian or us, does it really make sense that if we wanted to do this and we had the desire to do this, could we actually do it knowing where our signal technology is in the next 3 years? My question then is it better keeping it under medium term, or it seems to be more likely than under 0 to 3? Or maybe it doesn't make a difference.
That was one.
So maybe I can address that. What we're trying to do is show what the technical capabilities will be in the next 3 years, as opposed to where the resources are. And the reason for that, as soon as you start talking about resources, you get into then necessarily a prioritization, and that gets into what really should be done in a more overall transportation planning type of thing, not a technical document that says how things can fit together. So this is more, if you chose to do it, you could do it deservedly, as opposed to you could do all of that in that 3 years. I don't think anybody thinks that you could do all of that in 3 years. There's just not the resources available.
Thank you, Les.
And I can answer the question that, yes, technically, we would be able to do this in a year. There's the technology, it's an emerging technology of finding something that is both consistent and reliable in detecting bicycles, and it's kind of a lot of different areas. But with the signal upgrade project that we're working on, and the things that we're doing, and we do have the short-term capabilities that if we have the funding needed to do so, we could do bicycle detection. I think more in the near term. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have more questions? Any more questions for board?
Is there anybody from the public this time that has any questions or comments on the ITS architecture update progress? Hearing none, has this one already been out for review?
It's not going out for one review. It's our secondary plan. It is a secondary plan, so we're focused on extended stakeholder involvement. And a lot of people were involved in the two workshops. So the people who are actually looking at things.
Yeah. So the action requested, like I said, is recommended to AMATS policy committee for approval. Okay. So moved. Moved by Ms. Walsh. Second by Mr. Peters. Are there any opposed to the motion? And I guess I'm just gonna, for clarification, does that include the addendum? Yes. Okay. And Mr. Lindenmuth, did your motion with the addendum? All right. Are there any opposed to the motion? Hearing none, we are approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Les.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll sign off now.
So the next item in front of us is item 5E, which is the CMP text memo number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tracy Brewer. I'm the Transportation Planner with AMATS. And today we brought before you the draft Text Memo 6, which you saw at the May meeting. And then we requested comments from TAC members and our internal teams. I'd like to thank Vivian Underwood and Aaron Underwood for their help on that, along with Christine Sunday over at Transit. We did make some changes to the document based on some comments. If you recall, Dan Kretschmar gave a high-level overview in table 1, which is on page 2-0, we took the performance measures from the tier 1 and tier 2, and where those strategic goals came from were from the 2035 MTP and of course the MAP 21 planning elements. And we asked, much earlier in the process, when we were developing these goals, we asked the consultant to do those headers, and they brought that before the TAC some time ago. So I think Aaron had a question on that, so I wanted to make sure that he knew that. And then on table 2, parklets, which is a bicycle lane facility, were added as a strategy to the bicycle stuff, and that's on page 330. And then overall, there was an additional column added to the entire table on table 2. You can see that on page 330, but it's throughout. And primarily it's to look at strategies or plans that are currently being considered or underway. And while our document, because I have Windows XP or something, it doesn't reformat as beautifully as Cambridge Systematics did it, so I apologize that this doesn't look exactly like the really beautiful version that will ultimately be printed off in PDF form. So there were some reformatting, and pretty much that was all the revisions that we had. Transit had some comments regarding reduced transit fees and some corrections there, and so that was removed from the document based on Christine and Lance's department's comments. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Today we're seeking approval of the document.
Or is it recommendations and policy?
Yeah. So I can add that to the memo.
You're the approving body, we recommend. I burned my face. Are there any questions for the committee? I'm gonna open it to public comment. Are there any questions or comments from the public on the technical report number 6?
We're all ready to go, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just having discussion because the other CMP tech memos we've done haven't been approved by the policy
Oh, they
committee. They've been approved by the technical advisory committee.
And then we'll bring the full document.
Got it.
Yeah, and then it's at the very
Yeah.
end.
Okay, so we're doing individual kind of approvals?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the entire document will be brought forward together.
Got it.
And I do want to also emphasize that, of course, if you have flexibility when that final document, draft document is put together to make changes and refinements also at that point.
Okay. Hearing no questions or comments from the public, matter lies with the committee.
So the action sought was for approval?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Locke, seconded by Mr. Hanson. Are there any opposed to the approval of tech number 6? Are there any other business items at this time? All right. So next up is the informational reports, and the first is the public involvement plan update.
So I'm just going to start it off and let Joni give some detail here. As you know, as we talked about earlier, we had the Citizen Advisory Committee bylaws we discussed. That is something that runs throughout the public involvement plan. So that's very important. So we we're holding off on any movement on the public involvement plan update until that portion was determined. So now that we have some motion on that, some movement, we're ready to start cranking that back up again. So I'll let Joni will take you through what we have in front of you. Just an informational update.
Okay, so for the record, Joan Young with the AMATS Bikeway Coordinator. So your handout in your packet that says AMATS Public Participation Plan Bridge is the document that was requested by Madam Chair Marmillo, like the last time we visited this, and it was basically requested to say, you know, here's what's in the new document, here's what's in the old document, these are the things that have been taken out from the old, put in the new, these are things that were added, these are things that were taken away, and so on. And so with that document before you, you've got the first table showing the items that are either verbatim from the old plan or very, very similar language to the 2009 plan and where they are in the new plan. So it gives you page reference and section. So that's the first page, front and back. The second table are the items that were taken out of the 2009 Public Involvement Plan. And then we have those page numbers and the reasoning for why those items were removed. A lot of those items were removed because they were things in the plan that AMATS was not doing. It didn't have staff time to actually complete, or forms that were not being used between 2009 and now. And so you have the reasoning for why we took those out. And that was a decision made by the committee that was staffed with writing the plan document, and that included members of our AMAT staff and transit and some DOT planners. So that's the second table. The third table is the additional things that we added into the new plan, and we also did the page number and the reasoning for adding those in. So those were things that we felt would be useful to making the plan more transparent and easily understood by the public. So that's the third table. So that's the consensus of that's the gist of the bridge document. Our plan is to give you some time to look this over, and we can of course provide you with the old plan and the new plan if you'd like, and then to schedule a work session in the next few weeks, sometime before the next meeting, to go over the plan again because it's been so long since we visited it the last time. And at that point, we'll go over the plan again with you, address any concerns you have with it, and then Jamie Action and myself, we're going to provide a list of public outreach activities that we feel will be useful in rolling this plan out. And one of the concerns brought up by the committee last time around was that the new document, the new public involvement plan, needs to have a public involvement process and engage the public in its revisions. And so that's what we'll be coming forward with at the work session. A list of activities, public outreach activities. We'd like those to include focus groups, some community meetings, perhaps an online open house. We'd like to roll out some of the new social media techniques that are available to us to see how those work, and some other things. I don't know if Jamie want to.
We're very aware that as we move into the summer months, our public involvement is going to be more challenging. So using some of the newer strategies and using some of the strategies that involve people not actually having to make it to a meeting place at a specific time for a specific period will be helpful. Being able to reach people, and then additionally, looking at those EJ populations and making sure that we're going out into the community to reach those populations. That'll probably be our primary target when we're actually doing face-to-face outreach, is the EJ populations, low-income populations, really reaching out to them. And
You say EJ?
Environmental justice. Sorry about that. So we will, I'll alphabet soup. We'll do a lot of that face-to-face with those populations, and then also do a lot of online outreach in order to grasp those that are hunting and fishing and hiking and out of town when we would like to hold a public meeting, so.
And, and so that's sort of the plan, so we're putting that out for you today. And then the last thing I was gonna mention was, there was one small change in this table. During our certification review process that happened early this year, one of the things that they were really pleased with actually was the public involvement plan, and they liked pretty much everything that we had highlighted in there. The one thing that they asked us to remove was, the EJ maps, and those are the very last table, last page, the second item there, environmental justice maps, and that was just because we include those in the plan, but they thought, maybe some EJ population, don't want to be called out as to where they're located and things of that nature. So I think that's the only change that we have in that bit.
So you're saying that those were actually, you had those in additional sections, the environmental justice maps, but that they recommend you not include those?
Yes, so we have a couple in the actual planning document, and so they said, maybe you should consider taking those out of the document, and then maybe providing them on the website if people want to find that information, they can go, but not put them on display.
Okay.
They also recommended that for the Human Service Transportation Coordination Plan, so taking that into consideration.
Thank you for this. I know that we had requested because of the discussion, I know Ms. Howell and Ms. Witt with the previous document and this one, the format has changed considerably. I mean, the document itself looks great, it's just, the information has moved, but having this so you can look at it and go, all right, I know it was in the other one, making sure that you can still find it. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee?
Could you follow up real quickly on what you just said about the human service transportation coordination concept?
So we're getting ready to update the Human Service Transportation Coordination Plan as well. It's a plan that has a life of 4 to 5 years, depending on where you're located within the country, basically. And so that was a plan that I managed when I was at Transit, and since then it has followed me to AMATS. So I'm going to be working on that update this fall.
Are there any questions or comments from the public at this time on the public involvement plan updates? We've gotten a copy of that though.
Yes, and like I mentioned, I'm happy to provide more copies to anyone who wants one, give me one to review it.
Okay, so you said the goal was to schedule a work session, and are we going to have this as a business item next month, or is it with it sometime we're just trying to go through the public involvement process?
I think it would be nice to get the approval of the committee before we begin the public involvement rollout process. Yeah, and the schedule of it.
Thank you. And that was just the information on it, so we don't have to have you know. All right, so the next item before us is the status of waterways and aviation. Okay. I don't have much of aviation for you. We can wing it.
She's about to say.
Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know, I'm Sharon Walsh. I'm Deputy Director at the Port of Anchorage. And this is, I'm going to give you kind of an overview of what we do down there, and just a little bit at the end on the modernization project, but I'll focus mostly on what the port's all about. And how do we get this projector on?
It's flashing light over there. It says it's on.
I'm going to do this. This is kind of a dry run for a presentation I'm going to be doing on the 23rd. So, and I guess I'll do a short version at the policy committee also. So, if there's questions, please ask them, because that'll help me understand if I need to change any slides or do a better job for the next week. So you're the guinea pigs. First, start. Somebody with the AD card. Oh, that's high school. There it is. We got green light.
There it is.
No signal. Let's go.
It's fine.
That's right.
You're right.
May have to.
Change it. Ta-da! Oh, thank you. You must have had an AD card. I'm in them a lot. Permanent grade. That's us. Uninterrupted service since 1961. That's when the original piece of the dock was built. That's another view of it, and I think you're going to leave your on here. Okay, got it. Okay. Okay. So these are actually not the current gantry crane. I don't think maybe they are. Anyway, we have those are older cranes. But we have gantry cranes, and those are the container cargo offloading, and then we also have what we call the row, which means roll on, roll off. And that's the operation that Tote uses. So Matson, which was until recently Horizon Lines, uses the gantry cranes to offload their containers, and Tote uses the roll on, roll off, where they actually drive the trailers out of the ship, drop them, and drive off the other end. So we have 3 cargo terminals, 1 barge berth, 2 petroleum terminals. We also use the term POL for that. If I use it later, that's what I mean. 2.8 million barrels of petroleum storage right now, and one of the interesting things that's happening is for the first time in many, many years, decades, there's some new tanks going in. Delta Western has a project coming up. They're building a methanol tank right now, partly to fill a need that was created by Flint Hills refinery closing in Fairbanks. So they'll be bringing methanol into the port, putting in a tank, and then putting it on rail. I think rail, right, Brian?
I believe so.
Yeah, on up towards the slopes, because they use it up there in some of their processes. And then another interesting thing is Crowley has just announced that they were successful in securing a bid for an additional 1 million gallons of storage for J-Bear. That is storage that used to be kept in some port in Washington, and a facility in Washington, and that's being closed, so they need to get more fuel available to military, so it's going to be here. So 3 gantry cranes, I talked about those. 2 miles of rail spur that's connected to the Alaska Railroad. It's actually the rail is actually owned by the port, and the railroad comes on to use it when they need to. 3 regional pipelines. We have one that goes to the one from Nikiski comes to us. One goes to J-Bear, and then the other one is airport. We have 20,000 tons of cement storage. Another cool thing, especially for engineers, is ABI that's Alaska Basic Industries, which is the same company as AS&G. They are building right now they have the cement silos, and I don't think they're visible in this picture. They are building a dome. And if you've been to Seattle and gone to West Seattle, over the West Seattle Bridge, you'll notice that big dome there is Ash Grove Cement. We're going to be building one like that here. They are building it. It's 162 feet in diameter, and it'll be 40 feet tall. It's a cool structure, and that's a separate topic, but they air inflate the structure, and then they spray it with or they load it up with shotcrete, and then they let that harden, and then they have their domes. I'm not 100% dispute on the process, but it's going to be cool. And the reason they need to do that is because they run out during the year. Now that we've done more year-round construction, 20,000 tons isn't enough, and so this will drastically increase the amount of storage that we have. We're a national strategic seaport, one of 26, I think and that's a big deal. I'll get into that a little bit later, but it's mostly because of our location, you can imagine. And actually, we're kind of J-Bear's port, if you think about it. They're directly connected to us, so that's pretty handy for deployments and whatnot. We're a secured facility because of 9/11, of course. This thing has to be looked at the same way as any other transportation security situation. You know, we have cargo coming in. It's things like they randomly grab, they call it the tag operation, and they do a quality assurance, and they check the containers, you know, to make sure that what's on the manifest is what's actually in the container, and things like that. We have, as if you've been to the port or tried to come to the port, you do have to go through a security checkpoint, and you have to have business on the port to be here. So we're centrally located. Ready road and rail access. I don't think of us as centrally located. We're centrally located in Alaska, but not in town. We're kind of tucked up in a corner in the town. And we, much of our cargo goes on the freight forwarders in our cargo carriers. Okay. Oops. Here we go. Hey, I'll let you know a secret. Second PowerPoint I've ever done in my whole life. So good. My secret's out. The other one will be the third. Okay, we're an enterprise department of municipality. It means that we make money, or that's the goal. And we do, and have a history of generating enough revenue to cover all our expenses, and have a little extra to to save for infrastructure maintenance and things like that. A little extra, not enough to build a new port, but enough to contribute money to the city. And so we don't receive any tax revenue from the city, and we ourselves pay a fee in lieu of tax for attached to the port property, like a property tax, an income tax kind of that we pay that we contribute to the city. Okay, here we are again. Just a few. This is it. Yeah. Okay. This is the tote area, Total Motion Trailer Express. That's their row ramp. They go up one and come down the other. This is our Matson, formerly Horizon Lines area. They use the Gantry Cranes, so they do their running around here. Our port offices at present are right here. They will be going off the port later, and I'll talk about that when we talk about the project right quick. Then we have Tesoro, we have Crowley, we have ASIG, which is the fuel people for the airport. That's also Crowley over there. That's Tesoro. That's Flint Hills over there. And then right in here is these cement silos, and this is where the big dome's going to be. It's going to be pretty cool. And then this area up here, and we'll get into it again a little bit, but you've heard about the failed project. And, well, actually, that's a fact. Didn't work. Seawall, open cell sheet pile drilled here, and it turned out to have some problems, both installation and, well, there's still a lawsuit about whether the design is incorrect or not, so I probably shouldn't pass judgment on that. But we'll be taking some of that area out, but we'll still have some. We call this the north backlands, and ultimately, when everything's stabilized, we'll be able to use that for other cargo staging and other types of operations. Well, right now, if you went out right here, you'd see a whole bunch of modular homes that have been brought in by Widener. They're the ones going in over off between 4th and 6th off the Boniface. I think they're about done with that, but they bring the whole thing off at once, so you can sit in the office and see a house and come down the ramp. It's kind of interesting. Okay. The early years of the port, and one of the reasons the Port of Anchorage actually gained a lot of significance was during the '64 earthquake or afterwards. At that time, plenty of freight was coming in, Seward, Whittier, Valdez. It was a lot of people are happy to bring their freight in there, and of course, it makes a lot of sense to be down there. And maybe Brian can speak to the railroad's involvement, but these ports are subject to tsunami. And after the '64 quake, they were inoperable. But the Anchorage port, being fairly new, was still, this had only been built 3 years before. So because of that, it pretty well survived the quake. Could we survive another one? No, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. So as that significance developed, you can see that we're on the road system, and we're also in proximity to the airport for our air cargo distribution. And so you'll see a fair amount of freight come into us and go out to other places. Now, we've had a study done in April of this year, so this is recent. You might have heard 90% for 80% of the people. You know, those terms were tossed around for quite a while, and you know, we wanted to truth that because we want to be able to defend it. So we had a new study done, and these are very recent numbers. And we wanted to see what is the freight distribution of the South Central ports, how much of it is coming to Anchorage. So of the freight, the cargo freight, not excluding fuel, 74% of it is coming into Anchorage, 11% to other South Central ports, and 15% to Port Whittier. Now, here's the rub. We've got all that freight coming in here. We're important, and this is what we're sitting on right now. It's pretty. That's the actual void in the piling. Over the years, since 1961, we're 50 years old now and showing it. And we've lost a lot of strength in these piling. They need to be, we're just at the end of our design life. We've been putting in these concrete jackets. We've been doing about 100 of them a year at a cost of about $3 million a year. And it's not a sustainable way to keep this, we really need to replace the port in total. Kind of like when you're remodeling your house, you get to a certain point where it's not cost effective anymore and you need to start doing it. This is just saying that we have severe corrosion. We have several areas, most of our areas are over 50% corroded, and loss of, that's considered severe by ASP. I'll tell you what, I was not on port when the earthquake happened last September, but it really got people nervous. There was we did another inspection underneath the dock afterwards, and we're nervous. We gotta get that thing cleaned up. So this is the piling jacket. What that looks like is they put like a steel jacket around it and they're filled with concrete. And they last about 15, the new design we're using for that is 15 to 20 year life. We have to do 1,000 of them. We have 1,000 of them to still do. By the time we get done, we have to start over with the first one. So again, it makes it's getting not to make sense anymore. Also, the jackets don't give us lateral stability. They only give us, and help our gravity loads, help us sustain our gravity loading capabilities. Okay, so that's depression. Let's move on to some more fun stuff. So this is what the cargo, those are the Gantry Cranes, right, Matson ones have. They'll be painting those names over pretty soon, I guess. And then you can see, shoot, getting mixed up between the laser and the clipper. Okay, so that's the tote ship is in port right now, and the Matson ship is in, and you can see how they line up behind each other. These two tote ships, there are two of them. They call them Orca class, and they were specifically designed for this port because of our tides, only 30 feet cycle in the tides increase. You can come to work in the morning, and the ship will be way up there, and by the afternoon you leave the ship down there, and you're coming down on it. So. It's very tricky if you're the person operating that ship because they have these things called automatic capstans, and they tighten the lines automatically as the ship's going up and down, so they don't basically pull themselves off the dock. But it's a tricky situation. Tote solved that by building these ramps where the ramps themselves articulate, so they just keep driving on and off, and the ramps do their thing as the ship goes up and down. Okay, now let's talk about petroleum. That's how we get the cargo handled. Petroleum, everything that comes into South Central, 95% of the jet fuel comes to Anchorage. The other petroleum, you can see, some comes from Valdez, and some avgas comes in from California. But we get actually most of our petroleum from overseas. And again, with the Flint Hills refinery closing down in Fairbanks, that's really changed our petroleum look. So that's a tanker, that's a POL line. In 2014, we had, this is our little pie chart, how much of our business is container ships and the tons that are associated generally with parking those things and helping them get off the dock. Cement ships, that's pretty cool. We'll talk about that in a second. Cruise ships are having more and more. We had 4 port calls last year, and this year we have 9, about every 2 weeks. So we've had 2, and we have 7 more to go this year. Military comes in and out. We actually, the Northern Edge is over, and the destroyer USS Shoup wants to stop here for shorely. I don't believe they'll be having public tours or anything, but they'll be here if you look out there. And petroleum tankers and barges coming in. This is what's happening with our tonnage over time, and it's actually increasing. This is through 2014. The one to be watching is going to be the petroleum bulk dock side, the green. That's dramatic change. This represents like 4 tankers. This year we'll have 14 to 18, and they're telling us, the airport's telling us we'll have that many for next year. I mean, the fuel situation's really changing. So that's been kind of interesting. And then the yellow is the van spots and containers, and you can see if you look at the length of that bar, that's starting to get bigger after the 2009 slowdown. So these other colors are, I think that's, petroleum shoreside, that's stuff that comes in, and petroleum that goes through our valve yard. I won't talk about that on the next one. Okay, revenue history, we're holding our own. And actually increasing. Our revenue's up this year and our expenses are down, so we're ahead of the game, so that's a fun thing to be able to tell the new administration. Okay, foreign trade zone. Anybody know what a foreign trade zone is? No. Yes, Jerry does. Quiz, what? We're actually, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's a site that's located near a U.S. Customs Service port. It doesn't necessarily have to be a maritime thing, but it is. We happen to just be the agency that is designated to take care of the foreign trade zone for a cruise. And it's the only activated one in the state of Alaska. What's it mean? What advantage is if you are manufacturing, it's a way to save money on duties. If you're taking I have an example here. If you're bringing a raw product or a product in from somewhere else, so with the cement ships all generally come from Korea, they come from overseas. They offload cement, then ASG happened to take this cement out to their plant, and they had a contract to precast a whole bunch. We had 800 pieces, and these things are fairly large pieces. It's kind of a utilidor thing for Sakhalin Islands, send it back out to Russia. Well, if they had used the foreign trade zone thing, which they, I'm not sure if they calculated it out or not yet, but you save quite a bit of duty because you're bringing it in from out of country, and you're shipping, you're manipulating the goods, and then you're shipping them back out in a different form to another country. If you're doing that, you save duty tax. So it's not very well highly used at all. I think probably people aren't aware of it, but they're becoming such. So another example would be if you got a bunch of parts from Chile, and you made bicycles, and you shipped the bicycles up to China, which you wouldn't do because they make more over there. But that would be another way. If you set that facility up here in Anchorage, you would save on duty. So because you're in a foreign trade zone.
Because stuff's coming in and then going out without
Right.
being redistributed or used
Correct.
on. Okay.
You're not competing with, American products when you distribute. Okay, so I talked you a little bit about what we do, and I've shown you a little bit about we have a lot going on. We got a lot of projects happening, a lot of business, and we're on shaky foundation, to say the least. Thankfully, if I was in my old job, I'd probably have to condemn myself. So this is what the port layout looks like now. We call this Terminal 32112. 3, Terminal 3, cargo, ro-ro, or tow. Terminal 2, cargo, Gantry Cranes, or Vatson. Terminal 1 can be used also for cargo. The crane rails go all the way down here. POL 1 is petroleum oil lubricants. Offloading facility, the hoses and all the things that pump it out of the trucks in our valve system. And then over here is POL2, another place we can offload petroleum. The cement ship also parks in here. And right now, cement goes from here through a pipeline, and they push this dry cement over here into their silos in this area. Fairly long way. Okay, the new configuration is to take this out a bit farther to get to a 45-foot draft, which would be nice, and a little better current, a little better, less siltation, and to build new, all of these would be new facilities. So if you notice, they're going to shift to the south a bit, and there's a new one over here. What's really exciting about this one, this POL cement one, is that it'll be a straight offload for the cement, and it'll be out of the way of cargo operations, which right now they're kind of close to each other. So that's the existing, that's what's planned. It'll be done in stages. The first thing to do is get our building off the dock. We love it. We have some of the best views in town, but frankly, that space isn't well used as office space. It should be cargo handling space. We should get out of the way. So we'll be moving to a new building in the back, which will be a much safer building because it won't fall down in an earthquake. So that's a good thing. Now, as part of this step one also is to build this new POL, combination POL cement terminal, and fill in some of the armor rock rolling here. So get that operation out of the way so the other operations can be continued. Because the tricky part is we've got to build this and keep business going. I mean, you got to be able to still use it 365. Yeah, step two is like what I talked about before, the project that you've read about in the papers that, well, bottom line is it just didn't work out. So this area has caused a lot of siltation to start dropping here, which has really increased the dredging problems here, which is a big problem. I mean, Toad had to pull off the dock this spring because siltation had built up in there, and they had to wait for a higher tide to come back in. I think the bill was $25,000 to us because they couldn't do their work. So it's, yeah, we gotta solve that. So that would be the part of step two. Step three, now we've got the POL operations moved down here. This POL2 is still in operation. We keep this terminal operating, and we build the new, we reconstruct these terminals. And can you read that? I'm not close to it. Oh, relocate Horizon operations to the new Terminal 1, and we'll keep Toad up here. So we'll build a new one, move Horizon to that, keep Toad up here, then build a place for them. And then finally we'll, so you'll see the old one's gone, and everybody's happy, everybody's working. Then the last thing is build this area here. And the reason you see these things come out kind of at a skew is because it better follows the dredging line, better follows the current, less siltation. So that's the project. It's actually pretty well on track. C.H. Hill is our program manager. The team we have came from Gulfport, rebuilding of Gulfport, and they're very talented and very experienced. We're really happy to have them. This is the money situation. We have, right now we have about 130-something million in the bank from different grants over the years that were coming along, was left over from the other project before we stopped it. So with, to do step one, we need $6 million. We have that much. So this is the timeline for that. Then we can stabilize it in North Extension, takes $134 million. We've only got $64 million left. So we need to find that to get through step two. Then the big money is, of course, in the new terminals, new cranes, bigger cranes, and there'll be 50 gauge cranes, which means 50 feet between the rails. They can reach out 14 containers wide, which will also help us handle big ships. And we don't have that money, so we need that much. And total project right now, at 80% confidence level, is $485 million. We still need another 355. So we're turning over the calculations, but I haven't found that money anywhere yet. This little schedule right here shows what we can do with what we do have. We can, right now, we just awarded last week the test pile program, 48-inch, there'll be 48-inch steel piles, concrete filled, but we need to do some investigative work to see how hard it is to drive them. And so that work is awarded. The only thing we're waiting, and as soon as the permitting is finished, we'll start that, and we hope to have that, be doing that work this fall and finish it up early next year. The land site and building design work is in progress now, the early design work. Next year, they hope to get into the final design and we can move our building off the dock. We can finish that hopefully by 2018. And this is, meanwhile, while that's going on, we're doing the permitting. This is permitting for the marine structures, all the new wharfs out in the water. That's, of course, the biggie, is the permitting for that. And we can get, with the money we have, we can get through design of the north extension stabilization, and we can get through the design of the terminals, and we can get through enough to build that POL terminal, the one I showed you, down on the south end of the port. So we can do some things with the money we have. We'd like to be able to get through step 2 and get that north end stabilized so that we can not have the siltation issues. And then we'll at least be at a good place and a better place until we can get the money to build the whole thing. So I think that's it. There's some cards, little summary cards that are over on the table. And for questions.
Thank you. I thought it was very informative myself.
Well, glad you liked it. I'll take feedback and any good jokes I can use at the next meeting.
You did powerful.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you did.
Okay. So, Sharon, you were saying that was kind of your test run of your right. presentation. Yeah, it's a little scary, this picture. I don't know. I'm going to send one of these to my mom. Mom, look, I find you later.
Big leagues now.
You know, you'd be amazed how excited mom get over little things. Like the first time I was ever on the news or anything, I never thought I was making a report, and here it is 10 o'clock at night on a Friday. And my mom's like, I recorded it! I'm like,
I was drinking.
yeah. Mom's get excited. All right, so next item for informational report is 60, the feedback letter on intersection design.
Madam Chair, so at the last pedestrian committee, they had this, some extended discussion about some intersection designs for bike lanes, 2 intersections, and things of that nature. I know you're aware of this through the discussion, yourself and Scott Thomas on this. The bicycle pedestrian committee recommended, or they drafted this letter to share with both the PAC and the policy committee. And I believe Zach Fields is here from that committee to share some thoughts on this. And Tim Consevner is also here from the committee, but Mr. Fields is the one who wanted to share some thoughts on the letter that is before you today. It is an informational item, so.
Hi. Well, thanks for reading through the memo. The members of DPAC, as Craig mentioned, talked a lot about these designs and discussed the designs with many DOT engineers. And I think our concerns could be summarized as being that the design for the escape ramp without a bike lane continuing up to the stop bar, that design is inconsistent with Federal Highway Administration guidance. It's inconsistent with AASHTO guidance. It's certainly inconsistent with NACTO guidance, and it's also inconsistent with ITE guidance in terms of bike lane configurations and intersections. And when you design a bike lane in an intersection, what you want to do is maximize visibility for all users and maximize predictability And this, Joni made some copies of some of the illustrations in those standards and guides that I mentioned, and this one, yeah.
Sorry, after just some of the members of the meeting, I think you should start anything.
Sure.
Do you want us to go through that?
Yeah. And I just summarized the memo. So I was mentioning that the illustrations kind of say a lot. This is from the MUTCD. I think you all know the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's my favorite acronym. And it just shows the bike lane continuing right up to the stop bar. You can look through the ITE, through AASHTO's 2012 bike design guidance. You can actually go back to 1999 and look at AASHTO's bike design guidance. And they're all very consistent about showing a bike lane go right up to that stop bar. Now, more recently, a lot of cities, and you'll find this in the NACDO guidance, which FHWA actually encourages localities to use. What most cities that are doing bike infrastructure now are doing is having the bike lane go through the intersection to, again, increase predictability and clarity for different user groups. And all we're asking for is that the designs just are consistent with the bare minimum FHWA, AASHTO, and ITE guidance. The memo walks you through that, and the memo explains why the escape ramp design as proposed by DOT is so dangerous. And the reason it's dangerous is that what DOT proposes is that you have a bike lane along a road. As the bike lane approaches an intersection, you would have a, quote, escape ramp, and the bicyclist would get off the road and then approach the intersection on a sidewalk or a shared use path and cross the intersection in a crosswalk. Of course, not all intersections have crosswalks. The problem with that design is, first of all, that it would encourage bicyclists to make unpredictable movements while on the roadway. They would make an unpredictable movement off to the side, putting them in conflict with pedestrians. The greater problem is that it then puts them in a path to be in left or right hook collisions. Y'all are probably familiar with the studies that the municipality did of collisions in Anchorage, and most collisions are left or right hooks. They occur when automobile drivers are going down the road, they make a right turn, and those automobile drivers typically do not see bicyclists who are on shared use paths or sidewalks. We've probably all experienced this driving ourselves. It's really hard. If you're on even a 2-lane road, it's really hard just to see traffic, much less to see a pedestrian or a bicyclist who might be on a sidewalk, particularly when your vision is obscured by signs, bushes, other things. So, you're doing all you can just to take traffic into account. That's why those left and right hook motions are so dangerous. And that's why when you see in, again, federal highway, AASHTO, ITE guidance, that the bike lanes should encourage people to remain in a predictable place in the road where they're visible, including right up to that intersection stop bar. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I think the bottom line is there have been so many studies of good bike infrastructure. We have literally hundreds of cities to learn from about what good infrastructure looks like. There is absolutely no debate nationally or internationally about the proper configuration for bike lanes in an intersection. And all that BPAC would ask is that the Department of Transportation simply comply with FHWA, AASHTO, and ITE guidance and continue that bike lane right up to the stop bar. If we're going to have any kind of debate, it should be about the nature of a bike lane continuing through an intersection, because that's where the best practices are today.
It's just a technical question. How, like other northern cities, how do they, you don't have pavement markings in the wintertime, or
Right.
you can see, is it just people get used to it, or how do those operate?
It seems that there's a lot of that. What, 2/3 of the year, people here can probably see some degree of markings on the road. A lot of traffic lane markings become obscure in the winter. And, when you drive, you tend to drive the same routes over and over. You kind of have this mental memory of where the lanes are. And I think when you look at other cities that have seen a large increase in bike ridership, that usually corresponds to installation of safe bike infrastructure. People, it just sort of becomes ingrained in your daily habits of driving. So, you know, you see the bike lane and you see people using a bike lane for 6 months out of the year, and it's not as big of a deal when, you know, snow or ice obscures it because you're used to someone being there. But the winter thing is actually an important thing to bring up, because one of the problems with escape ramps is that when you do snow removal, we see this all the time, you know, snow accumulates on the side of the road. So if you have a bike lane which terminates and you want the bicyclist to get up an escape ramp, you know, most areas are going to be obscured by a snow and ice pile. And of course in the winter, then the bicyclist is going to go right up to the intersection. Obviously, infrastructure in Anchorage should be planned to be functional for all seasons, and it's just safer to continue right up to that stop bar, taking into account that those sort of berms of snow and ice are not always cleared very quickly.
Yeah, I've got a couple. Have you asked DOT about this?
We've had very extensive discussions with Scott Thomas and other representatives of DOT. When DOT first brought the escape ramp design to us, they proposed escape ramps and termination of bike lanes for most of the projects that are being installed over the next 2 years. We had a really long discussion about why that escape ramp design is so dangerous. And Scott Thomas came back and he changed some of the designs, but left a lot of them with the dangerous escape ramp element. And that remains our concern. Whether it's a high-speed road or a low-speed road, whether it's high or low volume, you still want predictability, you still want clarity. So, you know, those good design elements should be true on all those road types. And when you look at ITE, AASHTO, and FHWA guidance, you're going to find consistency of bike lane configurations regardless of speed and volume on the roads, in the sense that you want the infrastructure to continue right up to the stop bar in a lot of cases through it.
What sort of explanation did Scott have for leaving some of them the way they are? Usually doesn't work in the past.
Yeah, well, we had a discussion about the fact that the designs they proposed, to my knowledge, would be unique. I've never seen this kind of infrastructure in any other city. And it's not consistent with the federal standards. The concerns as expressed by Scott Thomas were, hey, if you've got a bike lane going up to the stop bar, and then someone bikes up to the stop bar, and then there's no traffic, and then they cross it, but they didn't see someone that they could get hit. And, you know, his implication was that, well, having this bike lane would suggest that it's actually safe to go up to it, and then maybe the bicyclist would do something wrong. And I guess I just disagree with that logic, because under that logic, we wouldn't have any stripes going up the intersection for automobile drivers on the premise that they might run a red light if no one was coming.
And I might just also add to that DOT's, one of their main issues is that they, I believe that the money for bike lane implementation is, we have enough money to install detection devices. That the main reason why they're not taking the intersections through, or the bike lane through the intersection, is because we don't have detection devices at the actual stoplights. And so their concern is the bicyclists would get up to the intersection and wait for the signal change, which would never happen, and then they would, and then, so some of the arguments are, well, wouldn't the bicyclists also be using the road at the same time as vehicles, and wouldn't vehicles be also signaling the light? So that is a concern, a liability concern. And so, and I don't think the problem is not being able to install them. I think the problem is being able to maintain them, and the cost of that is incumbent upon the city and not DOT.
So say install the detection?
To maintain the detection device, and maybe.
And what VPAC said is it's a lot better to have a bike lane continue up to the stop bar without detection, if that's what it takes. And, you know, from a budgetary perspective, escape ramps are expensive too, and they're dangerous. So yeah, we had a really extensive discussion about that. And, you know, if there's not money for maintenance, it's safer to just have that bike lane go up to the stop bar. Most lights in Anchorage are timed, or there's sufficiently heavy traffic that you're not going to be left stranded there.
I guess I'm a little, I don't know where this is going in so much as we have a letter that's asking us to do something, but it's been given to us as an informational item, direct DOT to do something that they don't want to do. So, what do we do with this?
If I may, usually this committee does not get engaged in directing anybody to how to design anything. I mean, thank you for, I guess, initiatives been worked on. It's not just the states, the way the states do it, it's also the municipality. There's, I don't want to mention, there's been a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, and a lot of disagreement. And so,
I appreciate, I think I get how we got to where we are. I don't necessarily have an idea to fix it, but I'm trying to figure out what we do with this.
Well, if I might, the timing of these intersection improvements is such that DOT still has time to fix the design.
And I know the conversations are still ongoing. I mean, the designs are changing on a day-to-day basis, and the things that are being looked at and considered as far as related to the bike lanes section and different application, whether it's Main Street, Minor Street, and honestly, whether or not there's space. Because in some side street locations, there isn't the space to continue the bike lane up to the intersection. And I personally just got back from vacation in a location where there are extensive bike lanes everywhere, except for the locations where they aren't space and they were terminated before the locations where there was no longer space to carry them through the intersections for that purpose. So there is a matter of consistency, and we're looking at this. I guess with this memo being an informational item, to be honest, we don't have the authority, from my understanding of this board, really to direct, as this letter says, direct the state DOT to do anything. I mean, really, as a committee, we don't have that authority to do anything. But I guess the conversations will continue to occur.
So, Zach, thank you. I mean, honestly, what this is exactly why the bike committee was created. We have the same conversations with freight, people that are dealing with freight. We have the same conversations that the Transit Advisory Board. They ask us to, go tell AMATS to just go do it that way. And, the world should be designed around buses. So I kind of encourage them to, we don't do the design, but the fact is that maybe your choice of words of direct might not be the right from what we have the ability to do, but the point is that, you have a design, maybe a design opportunity in some locations, as maybe Stephanie just mentioned, you go places and the opportunity exists. If you can't make it 100% coverage, maybe if you have the right of way and you can make it, the opportunities to start deploying these things where they can and the way in which you can maintain them. Just because you can't do 265 signalized intersections doesn't mean you shouldn't do one or two, or you start on a collector street. So, frankly, you're doing, and Joni, that's what this committee's about, is to bring these issues to us. And so we as agencies that are responsible for all modes of transportation, whether it's building or design, but we don't have the authority to say we don't like the design criteria manual, use the AMATS design criteria. So, some of these things, they look intuitively simple, and some of them are going to be a lot harder. I don't know about an exit ramp, except when I'm leaving Snoqualmie Pass, and a big ass dirt hill to slow down a truck. That's the only thing I know about an exit ramp. So, but I think, Stephanie is the traffic engineer and Scott is the Central Region traffic engineer. As long as they're listening to your concerns and we can find a spot where they may work as design comes forward, it's exactly what you should be doing. So don't think that since we can't direct, you're not being heard, because it's going to be little baby steps. And it's exactly what it's going to be. It's the same thing with pedestrians, the same thing with buses and trucks. So if I got to the part where the dash lines, I either decide to close my eyes to get to the stop bar, or I get off the road. So.
Am I correct in understanding your statement that I know it's been contentious, but that the dialogue is continuing, and it sounds like we're starting to get some good versions on at least a lot of these, maybe not all of them, either funding or just physical restriction?
to be honest, I've been out for a couple weeks and I know stuff
And
happened
probably-
while I was gone.
Yeah.
And I have some emails about it in my inbox that I haven't had the chance to catch up on. And like I said, it's looking at a changing on a daily basis.
And yeah, sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair. AMATS is also trying to bring some awareness by bringing some educational opportunities up to Anchorage. And we have a Bikeway design expert coming up in June, in a couple weeks, Joe Buckman, and he will be giving a workshop. This is on your agenda, the second item.
I was speaking
Yeah.
towards that, and the reason being that, you know, not that I expect him to be some sort of mediator or something like that, but, you know, at the same time, I see these buses being available for 3 hours, and I'm hoping that 2 hours and 47 minutes of it doesn't constitute talking about escape ramps on specific intersections.
No, I think the advantage is to having him come up, and he'll also be up here to give a workshop on the bicycle on Boulevard, since we'll have the new one on 27, going in there. But will be that he has vast experience in many different places, a lot of places which include snow, and cold weather, planning. And also that, he'll be able to give us examples of how they're mitigating this type of issue in other places. And DOT, one of the things that they're working on doing is, as mentioned, the conversation is continuing. They're looking for examples also where this type of design is an issue and how other cities are dealing with it. So that's how that's going.
Sounds like there may be some focused additional discussion in the mediation.
Yes, and so this is our first training opportunity coming up, so maybe we can bring him or some other people up again to give more, because I think education is a really big component of this issue.
I think if DOT follows the current standards and guidance and national best practices, the DPAC will be very happy.
Any other questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public at this time?
Actually, I do want to make one quick comment. I appreciate the information. The conversations are continuing, the more education we have, the more aware we are of the heck is it okay, now we know. So the time is not wasted to come and talk. I mean, it's really good to do our awareness up so that this kind of conversation will go on and that we'll be more educated. So thank you.
A big component of all of this is going to be public education. Because as the implementation continues, there's a number of bike lanes that have been striped this year already. We've gone down Arctic, just north of Fireweed, down the hill to 17th along Valley Moon Park, and then up the hill East Street all the way to 10th Avenue. There's actually 2 different things that have been installed. There's a dedicated bike lane and sections for their shoulders, but when you get to the bottom of the hill, you have that 90-degree turn, and we recognize a bicyclist is not going to be able to go down that hill and take a turn and a 4-foot shoulder, that they're going to need to take the lane. And also because of the on-street parking that occurs in the summer months of Valley of the Moon Park, that it's appropriate for the bikes to take the lane in that area. And so we have what are commonly referred to as sharrows, although that's not what they like. They're shared use lane markings that identify really trying to and let the drivers know that that is an appropriate location for a bicyclist to be taking the entire lane, really, and it's one of the priority corridors for bicyclists. So that has already been installed this summer. There's some other locations that are going to be installed. So a lot of this is going to be public education so that people recognize what those things mean. Some of it I think should be intuitive, like I think people should know that bicyclists are allowed to be in the roadway by law, but not everybody knows that.
We need a ski rope going up the hill with that.
Yeah. All right, if there's no other questions, thank you, Beth. Are there any other informational items?
Yeah, Jennifer. I would like to announce to the AMATS Technical Advisory Committee that DOT does have a new AMATS planner, and that's Mary Millen. Engaged in the MTP update, interim update, working with Vivian, and as some of you years of experience working at Gantry Cranes. And if their hiring freeze ever thaws, then we can bring in another person, so it's not continuing.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I thought that already happened. I know, I know.
Excellent stories.
Any other informational items?
So, many of you may already know that this is probably going to be my last AMATS TAC meeting. I'm going to be leaving transit effective July 1st. I will be the new O&B director for the municipality. I'm very excited. It's been kind of, I'm still kind of breathing, but it's been 20 years since I've been doing this. And I'll never say I'll never be back, because you just don't know what's going to happen. But I want to thank you guys. I mean, honestly, we've done a lot of really, really, really good things. So I've learned a lot, and a lot of what I've learned, I'm going to take with me, particularly on the capital side. That'll actually be easy. Maybe the budget would be easy if there's no money, so that. Anyway, I got a good crew down there, a lot of good people, budget analysts all across the city that I work with. So looking forward to doing that. As far as a replacement, I'm going to be talking to the transition team about who that would be. So thank you, everyone.
Found out about it a few hours ago.
I know, right?
Making money.
Hey, it's got port swag.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I love this.
They are really cool.
All right, any other committee comments? The policy committee meeting is 2 weeks from today downtown. As Joni mentioned, the Bikeway design workshop. This one is from 6 to 9 p.m. That's the one. Is it a public one?
Yeah, it's public.
Okay, because we also have an internal one, correct?
I don't think so.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Because there's one earlier in the day.
There's one earlier in the day.
There's
Bike-
one, maybe that's the one for the Bicycle Boulevard.
That might be the Bike Boulevard one then, yeah, because I know I have the invitation for that one. And then we will be back here next month, July 12th.